It's a great pleasure to introduce to you the President of the National Farmers Union, Tony Dechant.
Thank you. Thank you, Ed. Vice President Ed Smith, the hard-working state presidents of the Farmers Union, and I know how hard they work, former National President and longtime associate Jim Patton, President Ray Novak of our insurances, Dr. Mike Cracknell, Secretary General of the IFAP, distinguished co-op leaders, directors, and guests, all the many guests that are at this convention, delegates, members, and friends of the Farmers Union at this and in this 71st year of service to the American farmer. We're off to a good start, and it's been a good day. I'm pleased to learn that a great American is in the audience. He's a man who has given great service to education in this country. He's a man who has done a tremendous job in the field of aging, in the field of recognizing the senior citizens of this country. He met with some of our green thumb people this evening, and tomorrow morning at 11, we have Dr. Arthur Fleming on the program, and I hope that all of you will be here to hear this very distinguished educator, this very distinguished person who has a deep concern about the senior citizens of this nation. I wish the Nixon administration had 100 Arthur Flemings. Won't you stand, Dr. Fleming, please? When you registered, in your envelope you had a number of documents, including one titled The State of the Union, 1973. And in it I put together a report of what happened in 1972. I hope you will take time in the busy hours and days ahead to read it. It's a report of the stewardship of your national officers, your national staff in 1972. It divides it up into the business of agriculture, the Phase 2, the wheat drama, coalition efforts, member involvement, and our own organization. We printed it and distributed it to you because I didn't want to take time to repeat this evening. I've visited many of your conventions, or most all of the conventions, except Indiana, and you heard me talk about the things that are in this report. I'd like instead to talk about a few other things this evening. This is an historic convention. It is the first national convention of farmers to be held since the political earthquake hit rural America in the final days of 1972 and in the early days of 1973. You are here to break new ground in the rubble and dust of that earthquake, left in the name of a balanced budget. Around us are some 30 dead and dying programs of vital importance to rural people. It's almost as if you are here on the morning after to survey the situation. You are here to redefine problems in a rural America where farm programs, as we have known them, are to be phased out or destroyed. You are here to redefine the problems of rural people in a world where there are no longer any 2% REA loan funds, no REAP program, no water bank program, no indemnities for dairy farmers or beekeepers, no Hill-Burton funds for hospitalization construction, no regional medical programs to deal with catastrophic illness, no emergency loan program, no programs for forest roads and trails, nor forest protection and utilization. You are here to redefine our problems in the face of an ailing Food for Peace program which may be allowed to die when its legislative authority expires this year. You are here to redefine the problems of a rural America with depleted school milk and food stamp programs, a critically reduced public service employment program, a virtually dead low-cost housing program in the Farmers Home Administration, and a very sick conservation program for watershed development. We must reassess the problems of an agriculture faced with a plan to reduce farm prices and make farmers the villains in a spreading epidemic of inflation. We must examine the outlook for rural America in a nation where it seems we now have virtual one-man rule from the White House. We must assess our chances of survival in the knowledge that if we can persuade the Congress to come to our rescue with new legislation, it may very well face a presidential veto. We must take a new look at our destiny in a nation where compassion for the poor and the powerless seems to have been removed from the official policy of our government. The President says to the least fortunate in our midst, ask what you can do for yourselves. We must look to the future in a world where the value of our currency is being questioned and where we are suffering unprecedented humiliation in the money markets of other nations. The war in Indochina appears to be winding down. It would seem that now is a great opportunity for new direction. Now should be the time to renew our commitment to the resolution of our problems at home. But strangely, we hear few calls for this commitment these days. The worst scar left by that ugly war in Southeast Asia is the terrible wound left in our self-confidence, our pride as a nation that there is no problem too great for us to tackle. I say that this is the worst scar because it was that pride that made this country great. It was that pride that seemed to put us in the front every time we had to be there. And today, we are living with the nagging doubt that we made a dreadful mistake over in Asia. With that doubt comes the doubt that our technology, our institutions, and our government institutions may not be up to the tasks of solving our social problems. Just a few days ago, I read where time and time again this great efficiency that we boast about having in America on the industrial front doesn't quite measure up. And just within the last 10 days, We find that we were badly underbitten in Brazil by other countries that are doing a better job. The administration and its friends are playing on our fears. They are saying problems of race, poverty, and equal education are too great for us to try and solve. And while we are off balance and unsure of ourselves in the wake of that terrible war, these great efforts are being dismantled. Or worse, they are being converted for the personal, selfish gain of some in power. I refuse to succumb to this kind of defeatism. I am confident that the Farmers Union will not succumb to it. Year by year, the delegates and members of the Farmers Union have been steadfast. They have maintained the noble idealism that makes the Farmers Union a great organization. It was because my colleagues and I on the national staff were armed with the 1972 policy statement that we were able to move into action against the cynical efforts of the administration to do in the family farmer. It was this great statement of purpose that allowed us to testify for the great programs that we have seen abolished in press release statements slipped late in the day under the USDA press room door. More than 250 farmers, some of you here tonight, have journeyed to Washington in recent weeks to take part in some of the toughest, hardest-hitting lobbying Capitol Hill has seen in many years. You walked the corridors of their office buildings. You made your case well. You saw the votes on REA 2% loan funds and REAP. You served notice that the Farmers Union was there to fight. But my friends, that was part of last year's policy statement. To make the fight only on those grounds is but a rear guard action of forces in retreat. We cannot abandon those fights, of course. We've got to give them everything we've got. But to win, to really win, we must take the offensive. Nobody ever scores if you're on the defensive. Today we heard some good-natured banter between President Burke and President Stone about the Big Red of Nebraska and the Big Red of Oklahoma. And yet neither team can win unless they score and unless they're on the offensive. And that's why I say that we must take the battle to them on every front. And it's important that we choose the fronts, that we decide the battle plan. Our work's cut out for us tomorrow and Wednesday. Hopefully, we will emerge from this convention with 3 national task forces to spearhead our efforts in the year ahead. Your state presidents and I have been talking and working on putting together national and state task forces. Let me spend a moment on them. One task force will implement our policies to achieve economic justice for family farm agriculture in America. I hope it will fight for price protection and for sensible supply management. I hope it will fight for equity in the tax system and for adequate credit at reasonable interest rates. I hope it will fight in the corporate jungle for the preservation of family agriculture itself. Another task force will implement our policy to establish foreign trade on terms that will guarantee a generation of farm prosperity. I hope this task force will fight for new international commodity agreements with minimum prices, not only for wheat, but also for feed grains and milk. I hope it will fight for permanent extension and expansion of our Food for Peace program. A third task force will implement Farmers Union policy to protect and preserve our environment for future generations of Americans. I hope this task force will fight for restoration and expansion of REAP. I hope it will fight for a vast increase in research on alternative methods of controlling insects, diseases, and predators that destroy our crops and livestock. I hope we have the nerve to put some money on the line on some of these things. The problems we in the Farmers Union face are not small problems. They are big problems. They do not affect us only as individuals, but all of us as a group. They are regional and national problems. Some of them are global problems. Each member of these national task forces will head a task force in his or her state. The jobs of these task forces, the national task forces, and those in the state will be to carry out the policies in their respective areas of concern which you, the delegates and members to this convention, will formulate in the hours ahead. And the jobs will not be easy. These members, these task forces will be challenged by our enemies. As always, they will be ridiculed by faint-hearted or foolish friends. I call on you to join these task forces battalions of the Farmers Union, not for comfort or glory, but for hard work. As we work for solutions, we may and we will be joined by others, or at times we may have to fight alone. Let me give you a few examples. In recent years, as we work on our transportation problem, the boxcar shortage, the abandonment of tracks, the trend to monopoly, we will have, and as we work in the weeks and months ahead, I can assure you that we will have nearly every farm organization with us most of the time, even the Farm Bureau. There are a number of programs that all of us work together on. We coordinate our efforts by telephone calls. It's not a hard job to do. They know our program and we know theirs, and we know the areas in which we can work together. And we do. But as we work for a new international wheat agreement with minimum prices, we will have less company. We will be joined undoubtedly by the Grange, by the NFO, and possibly by such special interest groups as the wheat growers. The Farm Bureau will not only be absent from our side of the table, but they will be in opposition to us. As we work for strategic commodity reserves to stabilize the marketing system here at home, we will be lonesomer still. Many of the organizations that make up the National Farm Coalition will be with us. But we might, sometimes we have been, virtually alone on the strategic commodity reserve fight. Fighting alone against powerful and resourceful enemies is not often pleasant. If you're not prepared to fight the battle, to solve the problems we will be discussing at this convention, regardless of who joins us in the trenches, then I say to you, don't call for action in the policy statement which you will produce here. Be prepared to fight for what you say you want done. Let these be the tests of our policy. One, is the problem real? And two, are you willing to work for its solution? And if you cannot answer yes to both of these questions, then I believe the issue fails to deserve your support. We do not have to work on every problem. We've got plenty of them. There's plenty to go around. But I submit, ladies and gentlemen, that a system of agriculture that dooms 40 to 50,000 families a year to failure has many problems. A system of politics that cannot deal with one man rule in Washington, D.C. has many problems. An economy that pays its most efficient producers the least, and which has galloping inflation along with record unemployment, has many problems. A nation which erases from its conscience compassion for the poor and the powerless has many problems. I want to say to you that we will work for solutions to these problems. We will join our fellow members in pursuit of our common goals. I'm not asking that any of you go out alone to do battle. And I know that many of you are capable of doing it. But we will succeed in direct relationship to the numbers of our members that we can put into the front lines. Our task forces will and must become our multipliers. As most of you know, I grew up in Kansas, and as I've said before, our education system back when I went to school was perhaps not the best in the world. But it was strong in a few subjects, and one of the subjects that it was strong in was arithmetic. We learned how to count in western Kansas. We learned how to add. Nobody's ever kidded me in Washington, D.C. I don't care what chairman of what committee I was in front of, I had a pretty good idea of where I stood, because I could add. But my friends, arithmetic is more than addition. It is also multiplication. And that's our job. That's the job of our task forces. No dedicated few will sit up night after night, day after day, to solve the problems that concern us. Our problems will be solved by hundreds and thousands of you and your neighbors and neighbors further down the roads of rural America. Our task forces and the friends and neighbors we mobilize will give the decision makers of this nation no rest in the year ahead. We'll contact them singly and in groups, and then we'll contact them again. We're going to communicate with all the means at our disposal. I pledge to you tonight that we will fight alongside friends and allies. We'll do everything we can on the national front to put together whatever coalitions it takes, to work with any group that wants to go in the same general direction, whether it is on the farm front or whether it is on the non-farm front, because we've got to have everybody. But I'd like to also say that if it is necessary, we'll fight alone. We'll fight for what's right. Now, let me just outline hurriedly and briefly some of the battles ahead. I hope that the people in the Farmers Union will fight and do battle for a meaningful grains arrangement. Now let me tell you how it looks. The administration will be against us. As I indicated, the Farm Bureau will be against it. I visited with Bill Kufis on the telephone some weeks ago. We were discussing a bill that we had interest in, and I outlined to him what we were planning to do on to put together an international wheat agreement. I told him how we wanted to avoid going to GATT, the general agreements on trade and tariffs, that we'd rather be in the ballpark of United Nations, under the general auspices of United Nations, because the President has opened some doors in China and in Russia, and we applauded his efforts. And I think it's important that if we're going to have a meaningful international grains arrangement, that Russia and China and India be in this program, be in an international grains arrangement. I thought and think that this is tremendously important. And I outlined this to President Kufis, and he just told me, you know our policy, and we'll not be with you on this fight, we'll be against you. Let me say that except for the Farm Bureau, as I indicated earlier, we're going to have the Grange and the NFO and the wheat growers and the grain sorghum people. We're going to have a sizable number of people here in the United States with us. I hope we'll have the grain cooperatives with us all the way. We know where our own people stand, but we hope we have all of them. Let me say that every major farm organization in Canada will be with us. And two of our friends from the Saskatchewan Wheat Pool are, as you know, here with us at this meeting. We've met. I convened a meeting in concert with Ted Turner of the Saskatchewan Wheat Pool, and we had 11 organizations, U.S. organizations and Canadian organizations, and we put together a plan for an international program. Our friends in Australia will be with us. Our friends in the European Common Market, in those nations over there, some of them in the export front, but most of them on the import front, they'll be with us because they're concerned about orderly international marketing. Let me say, I believe the United States Senate will be with us. I want to remind you that when we asked the Senate to pass a sense of the Senate resolution urging the administration to go back and negotiate price minimums after the last wheat agreement was negotiated, we passed that resolution unanimously, and within minutes after that was passed, we ratified the treaty by a vote of 77-0. So I think we're going to have the United States Senate with us. The trend throughout the world, as I indicated a moment ago, is to move toward orderly international trade. We've got to leave this business of the dumping onto other markets. No one's going to let us get away. The days of this buccaneering, the days of to hell with the other guy, and of just producing and dumping it and ruining their markets, that's all gone. And the only people that don't understand it are some of the people here in this country. Some of those people with stars in their eyes, that somehow there's a magic thing, that you can somehow make a fast buck by putting it all together and then dumping it. Our administration doesn't understand it. And let me say, I raised hell with the other administration that preceded this one because I didn't think they understood it well enough either. So it's only here in this country that we have groups that want to hang on to a past that's gone. Now let me tell you, we're going to have a farm battle also. 5 senators, Senator Curtis of Nebraska, who is the ranking Republican on the Senate Agriculture Committee, Senator Bellman of Oklahoma, Senator Dole of Kansas, Senator Young of North Dakota, and Senator Eastland of Mississippi have introduced a bill that would extend the 1970 Agriculture Act for 5 years. Now, I think I know how the forces are going to be deployed on this one. Let me take a stab at it, see how well I come out. I think that it is fair to say that, again, now we're talking about where they line up. The Farm Bureau will be for part of the bill. There's a quote in yesterday's paper here in the Omaha World Herald that says that the American Farm Bureau Federation called for approval of legislation under which acreage controls for grains and cotton would be geared in only to prevent price-depressing surpluses. Well, that's what it says. Now, on the one side, we're going to have the Farmers Union and the some 30 farm, commodity, and cooperative organizations that make up the National Farm Coalition trying to strengthen the bill.